Volvemos a la cadena de guerra aérea de la Fuerza Aérea de Chile.
Buenos días, estamos a 10 minutos de dar inicio a esta actividad. Estamos dando la llegada al señor subsecretario de Defensa, así que por favor para que ya tomen sus posiciones. A todos aquellos que se encuentran conectados en línea, les agradecemos por su conexión, por su participación en este seminario y estamos ya a breves minutos de comenzar esta actividad, así que muchas gracias por acompañarnos. For all of you that are already connected in this seminar, we appreciate that you are joining us for this seminar, and I'm letting you know that we'll be starting shortly in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Colonel Carlos Mayer, Director of International Affairs of the Air Force of Chile, and from the headquarters of the Air War College, we cordially invite you to this seminar on women, peace, and security. We are developing it together with the IADB. Before we start this activity, I would like to share with you something that fills us with pride, and that's the fact that we have right now more than 11,700 people inscribed in this seminar from 65 countries, which for all of us is a record of audience, especially with its global reach for the Air Force and the IADB. And at the same time, 7 of these people that have registered are from the Antarctic. To start with this activity, because we're transmitting with a simultaneous translation, English, Portuguese and Spanish and English, and it is going to be taped and it's going to be available at the IADB. To all of you that are registered and that are following us online for a certificate, and together with this certificate, you will receive a satisfaction survey that we really beg you to fill in so that we can continue improving these activities and processes that we develop. The objective of this seminar is basically to share our best practices and the experiences of the different countries and organizations that you're going to listen during these 3 days with regards to how and what are the operational implications, advancements, and challenges when we implement the perspective of gender in the armed forces. The agenda for today is going to start with a welcoming by the 2 institutions that are developing this activity, the Air Force of Chile and the IDB. Then the activity is going to be officially opened by the words of our Deputy Secretary of Defense of Chile, and we will listen to the first presentation by the OAS, and then we will listen to the representative of the International University of Florida, an authority in women, peace, and security. And for all those that are essentially here in Santiago, we're going to have a break. And all of you that are following us online, we're going to leave you accompanied by institutional videos so that you can get to know better what the IDB is and who we are as the Air Force of Chile. And then after the break, we're going to start with some technical presentations by the auditor of the Air Force of Chile, Paula Carrasco, and we're going to talk about the new leadership and how to require that talent by Colonel Varela of the Air Force of Chile. And we will have 2 presentations, more than one that has to do with the defense policy on gender equality. And finally, a presentation of the Canadian Navy on the initiative of ELSI and the promotion of the participation of women in the armed forces. To start with this activity, I'm going to leave with you General Fernando Silva, who is the commander of the staff commander, and he has a broad academic curriculum and is a teacher of this academy. And he is also the staff commander and also in charge of the gender department, because in the Air Force of Chile, we have an institutionality that has been developed for this purpose. Good morning. I'm going to talk only for 3 minutes, I hope. And first of all, I would like to make reference and thank you for the presence of the Minister of Defense and the members of the IADB, officials and officers accredited in Chile, heads of the armed forces, members of the government, and the people that are connected to us from more than 65 countries, ladies and gentlemen. The Air Force of Chile, the presence of women is a part of its history. And first we started in administration and then we integrated them into the different services and also became part of the students of the different areas and are carrying out combat positions as well. The focus of gender is not only on women, but also to evaluate the impact of the decisions, the different decisions of all the level of commands of men and women, and the relevance of the operational planning considers the different particularities of gender to exploit a specific strengths or to apply mitigation measures, the alteration of the decision, increasing the efficiency and efficacy. It must be associated with the compliance of the mission that we have, be it the humanitarian deployment or anything that requires our presence. To understand the gender roles allows us to have a full vision of the theater of operations, and the gender roles impact and shape the conflict or the situation of emergency that we want to intervene or pacify. So the joint work of women and men allows us to increase the skills of our officials and evaluate the conditions and intersectionalities of our subjects of protection, distancing them from stereotypes. Internally, it allows to construct the human development of each one of the members, increasing their levels of satisfaction and permanence in our institutions, and allowing them to reach excellence in their service. This allows us to have early alerts and create some safer and respectful working environments, increasing the organizational happiness. And also this focus is linked with equity right now, an essential element for capturing and having an integral exploitation that allows us to help all the members of the unit in their development. This is something that recognizes the person as someone that transcends their comrades and people. In a world that is more interconnected with technology, we cannot be isolated. And this seminar was developed together with the IADB, that is an agent of influence that is very relevant, with whom we want to transmit the knowledge, good practices, and the challenges that all this imposes on ourselves to solve all the threats that attack us. We thank the IADB for accepting our invitation to carry out this seminar together, as well as the fact that we recognize our Air Force as one of the regional leaders of women, peace, and security. And today we are accompanied, and through the digital channels, men and women that have participated and that right now are deployed in different peace missions, contributing with their particularities to the strengthening of peace in the different regions of the world. Thank you very much.
Mi general. A continuación, voy a dejar con ustedes.
Thank you, General. Now with you for the welcoming remarks of the IADB, the Brigadier Flavio, who is the Secretary and Director General of the Secretariat of the IADB. He is a General of the Air Force of Brazil with great academic experience in projects that are very important for the Air Force of Brazil, and that from his position at the IADB has been a great promoter of these activities, especially in what has to do with women, peace, and security. The floor is yours, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to our seminar, and for the productive collaboration that represents a crucial framework and a commitment with the agenda of women, peace, and security at the United Nations. In the following days, we want to have the opportunity to improve a variety of essential issues, providing from this topic the current policies that guarantee the equality in the field. These discussions will be enriched by the different approaches and the academic and with specialists in human rights. We are here therefore, to discuss and present concrete actions that can be implemented in the armed forces, creating an environment where the value of the topic becomes a reality and and reflect our society in their operations. As General Director of the Secretariat of the IADB, I affirm our commitment in promoting a dialogue that can create a vital role for women in the levels of decision, security, and defense. In this sense, I highlight the launching during the seminar of a very important course, a course that is going to be offered by the Ministry of Defense of Spain on the agenda of women, peace, and security. And this event must be a catalyzer for the strengthening of the collaboration networks, going in depth in the understanding on the impact of the perspective of women in the security and defense, and being able to advance significantly in the different joint efforts to promote peace, security in our hemisphere. Finally, I thank immensely to the Air Force of Brazil for their fundamental alliance, and I cite Fernando Silva and all his team in Santiago. Thank you to the Air Force of Chile in the carrying out of this seminar, and to each one of the speakers that are going to give us their very valuable knowledge. I also thank each one of you and those that accompany us through the internet for our participants whose commitment with this subject is going to strengthen the collective commitment to this topic. As the Commodore Mayor already said, we are right now 11,794 participants that have been registered of 75 countries. A clear indicator of the importance of this. And let's have a productive day full of learnings. Thank you very much. To continue, I want to give the floor for the opening remarks of this seminar to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. He is a lawyer that graduated from the university, the Catholic University of Chile, with a master's in defense and security of the Inter-American Defense College, and a master in international affairs of the University of Barcelona. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you very much, and it is a pleasure to be able to be here. As we have seen, we have started with a small tradition. I had to study at the Inter-American College, and I welcome you all.
E, por supuesto, para nós é muito importante receber vocês. Sejam bem-vindos a ter essa oportunidade de fazer a palestra.
And to have this opportunity to talk about women, peace, and security, that is a topic that is so important for us today. And then in French, that's another problem. Good morning. Today we have a very special framework. We are saying hello to all those that are participating through streaming, and for those that are here face to face, we have a special gift from the Air Force of Chile, and we have a wonderful day in Chile with all the snowy mountain ranges, and to all those that come from friendly countries, we have a wonderful gift for you with the beautiful view outside. I wanted to also greet Flavio Oliveira, representative of the Air Force of Chile, and representatives of the IADB. Dear panel members, guests, and audience, I welcome all those people that are listening to us through streaming. I think that it is one of the great things that the pandemic left us. It left many complex things, but this is something positive, and we want to take advantage of it. I also add myself to the words of Colonel Mayer to welcome cordially to this seminar called Women, Peace and Security, the implementation of the perspective of gender in the armed forces and its operation implications, advancements and challenges, organized by the Air Force of Chile and the IADB with the support of the member states and the observers. And I thank each of these institutions for this notable initiative that in 3 days will debate on a topic of first relevance for the government of Chile, for the state of Chile, and for the Ministry of Defense. I want to greet on behalf of the Minister and the Air Force of Chile. The agenda of women, peace and security, Resolution 1325 of the UN, constitutes the global framework of action and seeks the practical implication on the protection, participation of women in the context of a conflict and post-conflict. This global framework has determined in our country the advancements that we have been able through the implementation of our national plan. In 2009, during the first government of President Bachelet, also the former defense minister, Chile had its first plan and became the first country in Latin America to do that. Considering the experience and the implementation of the first plan, and in the national context and the increase of the participation of women in the stabilization processes of the United Nations in Haiti, and in 2011, during the second term of President Bachelet, we had the second plan. I participated in both documents, so it's a story that I feel is my own. 9 years after that last milestone in the international security scene has changed a lot, reflected in the resolutions dictated by the Council of Security linked to women, peace and security that has transited through the most extensive conception of the agenda, particularly after 2015, when the Council of Security adopted a resolution 2242. I think that was a great change and a positive advancement, and it is an expansion that we have to undertake with responsibility. This is why this broad conception and the multiple challenges that we face at the national level, regional level, and global level constitutes the context of configuration of our third plan of action of the nation that very soon will be published. This plan is an essential part of the measures adopted by the government of Gabriel Boric to promote the formal and substantive equality of rights between men and women in all areas. We hope soon to be able to share with you the experience of the confection of this third plan and after its starting into action. This framework is the one in which I congratulate the Air Force of Chile that has had and will continue having a fundamental role. In the next weeks, 1 or 2 months more, it should be ready, and we're going to present it, and we're going to comment it and discuss it, and we're going to tell those that did not participate how we did it, and we're going to work so that it can become a reality to be implemented. On the same line that I mentioned, I want to highlight the advancements of the Air Force in gender matters. The publication of the policy of the gender perspective and the structure of the functional structure with its Department of Gender, with the first general of the Armed Forces, General Paula Carrasco, and I want to greet her, and Francisca Muñoz as the first woman at the command of a unit of the patch in the Antarctic. And we greet her online, together with everybody that is accompanying us. And we have increased the percentage of female officers that are so important. This War Academy, it's about 30% already. And this, with the requirements of, will allow them to reach the highest positions that will allow them to perform in equal conditions with the men. And we are very happy that we can be here sharing all this with you. And we have advanced, and not only in the fact, but also in each one of the areas of national defense. Nevertheless, there are still challenges, and in this logic, events like this have a special value. I want to highlight the stress in the operational implications that the gender agenda and focus has to do with the armed forces. Today, it is clear, and the experience, the compared experience of the country with the first level armed forces, that the perspective of gender has to be incorporated throughout the whole career and in the execution of the different operations that the armed forces carry out, considering the gender perspective mitigates the consequences and desirable consequences and allows us to carry out the vision better. I did not have this on my speech, but I think it's important. We speak a lot about the armed forces, but we need to talk more about the political level. We demand the armed forces, and we have to see at what level we are from the political level as well. And this is also applied to the Ministry of Defense in our case. Here we have advanced a lot. If we compare it to 10 years ago, we have had significant changes that I value, but we still have a lot to do. I want to give an example. In the subsecretary, there was only one woman as a head of division, the first women that are called strategic areas, and there were 5 men and 1 woman. And now we have the conviction now we have 3 women that are heads of divisions and 3 men as well. So this line can not only be demanded to the armed forces, but also to the maximum political levels of the Ministry of Defense. So in this sense, we value that 3 women have led our ministry. The first one was President Bachelet, the second woman was Bien Belloc, and the third one is the Minister Maya Fernandez. But for instance, as subsecretaries, we've only had one, Paulina Bogano. So I think that these challenges have to be understood in their integrality, and it is necessary to talk about the defense sector and not only of the armed forces. On this same line, I would like to also highlight the confederation and international perspective of this encounter. In this sense, I highlight the participation of military representatives as well as civilians, practitioners and professionals from Peru, Brazil, Mexico, the United States, Canada, Spain, the UK, and the European Union. Once again, we greet you all and we thank you for your presence today. And besides, I highlight the participation as audience virtually or also face-to-face of 11,944 persons and from 65 countries. This perspective, this international perspective that is so diverse and ample is coherent with the global agenda, like that one that was built after the resolution 1325. And every time that we have gone out, that we have been talking with the countries outside Chile, or when we have received them in Chile, this has been a discussion topic. We talked about this with the Vice Minister in the visit last year to the UK, and also the meeting of ministers of defense in the South Pacific, and we've had conversations with Conversec 2 weeks ago with Argentina. This is a topic that is on the agenda that we have to promote through encounters like this one. So I conclude congratulating the organizers of this encounter, and including the operational part as the center of this encounter, and procuring the broad participation with a global reach. I wish you all a wonderful day. I hope that we can get good results and take advantage as much as we can of this. Thank you very much, Undersecretary, for your opening remarks. To continue, we're going to give the first presentation of Paths Towards Peace and Security, an Agenda for the Americas by Hillary Anderson. She has great track on the topic of women, peace and security. And she is at the OAS, and the IADB is the. I leave with you Hillary Anderson.
Good morning, everyone who is joined us on the seminar. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I don't know if I have available my camera, but I think that I will share my presentation. I'll be able to share my presentation. I would like to thank the Air Force from Chile and the Inter-American Defense Board. I'm shocked knowing how many people are joining. I hope that we can have as many participants in this amount of audience in the next meetings. Just 1 minute while I share my presentation. My presentation is along the same line what the secretary mentioned, broadening the idea of women, peace, and security beyond the context of armed conflict, to give an answer to the nature that is constantly changing the peace and the security of our territory. Obviously, as my colleagues mentioned already, the agenda on women, peace, and security started with Resolution 1325 on year 2000. But prior to this, there's a series of legal instruments and regulations regarding rights of women that are important for women, peace, and security, but also conflict, starting with the Convention to Avoid or Eliminating Violence Against Women in 1979. And the committee, that convention, after the implementation in the countries, issue Recommendation 30 that's specifically for women on conflict and post-conflict. So in the Inter-American realm, that we adopted the Eradication and Prevention Convention in 1994 in OAS. So this convention, it's also stating that the states have the obligation to give special attention to women that are in conflict situations, but also in the manifestations and the magnitude of violence, of course, in these situations. So in the Inter-American, we also adopted the Inter-American program on women's rights, equality, and gender equity, known as PIA, that also talks a bit about the situation of security in conflict in different countries for women. And in year 2000 as well, we added to that framework, to that regulation existing already on rights, equality, the agenda on women, peace, and security that started with. Maybe we can turn off the camera and we can see the presentation. This is important for the Zoom presentation and also for the YouTube live that we're having. So maybe we can turn off the camera and go back to the presentation. Just a minute.
Sí, ahora se ve, solamente faltaría pasar a modo presentación, por favor, Hillary.
Perfecto. Sí, no me está ahora sí. Muy bien. Perdón, como decía, mi computadora está un poco lenta esta mañana, lo siento. Bueno,
My computer is a bit slow this morning. So again, going back to the Resolution 1325 that we adopted in year 2000 for the Beijing platform, that is the fourth conference of women. It has a whole chapter of conflict, women. So I would also want to highlight that 1325, it didn't come from nowhere. It was built on a legal framework regulation framework and the movement of women. All of these conventions, CEDAW, L'Operal, 1325, Beijing platform, these are all product of a big alliance and coordination of women globally and coordination with allies at a political level at the time. So since year 2000, we have been adding to the agenda piece of women, peace, and security some of the resolutions to 1820, 1828, so on and so forth. And this is a test, a deep test of different topics that we have talked about on 1325, but that needed more depth, including the topics, the sexual violence and conflicts, participation and leading of women throughout the resolution of conflicts, but also consolidation of peace. The justice sector, the access to justice for women and for victims of conflict. And during the last years, we have been going deeper on everything that has to do with reparations, restoring women in areas of conflict, services, multi-sectoral services for women that have been affected at a certain point by conflict. It also has to do with the reform of security.
Y todo eso como que un lado, la participación activa y también
the active participation and effective participation of women for the establishment and consolidation of peace. For this, for us, this is a work area that is very important. Women that are leading, participation that is effective and active is not only being there, no, it's more of being on the resolution of conflict, being part of consolidation and negotiation, to have an impact, to have a voice, to have a role, to have real the possibility to influence the agendas and to affect this change. And the second is the approach towards violence, sexual violence, but some other manifestations of violence that has to do with conflict as well. So what I want to highlight as well is for 1325 isolation, interaction of what we call gender, peace, women, peace and security, and all of the other resolutions, but with the broader agenda, right of women, gender equality that have been built during the last years. This is how we have found this expression on the Inter-American Conference of Women in 2022 and going up to year 2026 for a specific line on women, peace, and security for the first time in history. This has been very difficult for women to have the topic women, peace, and security on the political realm of OAS. But we want to coordinate as well the agenda of women, peace, and security with the broader agenda at the hemispheric level. This has been helpful for the reflection during the last years, once we fostered the strategic plan, and a series of questions that came up regarding the current context of the Americas. How do we understand conflict on the peace continent, as we call it? We tend to say this, that America is a continent of peace. I mean, we are, but how is it that we still understand conflict, and what's the role of the armed forces or all of the civilians that are part of the security, conflict, peace, so on and so forth? So this is another question. How do we understand peace in the continent that still have tribal behaviors at a multidimensional level, as we call it on OAS, interpersonal conflicts, so on and so forth? And how do we understand security from the feminism, from the women movement? Is it only violence, or is it something that goes deeper? The real reality of the Americas need a different approach, a non-traditional approach to resolve crisis, security, but also conflict. And this has important implications for our actions, our policies, legislation that wants to manage but also mitigate the conflicts. implications also for our understanding, how do we resolve the conflict, and all the parts that are involved that the subsecretary mentioned, not only the armed forces, but all the parties that are managing crisis and conflicts, including, of course, the armed forces, but also referring to the people that are at a political level, decision makers, people that are implementing public policies, but civil society as well. Civil society, it's also an important party on management of crisis, conflict, and this is something that we have seen during the last crisis that we had to lead at a global level, that is COVID-19. So this reality comes after a series of tensions in our countries that has been crystallizing different crises that we have seen during the last years. We have seen political crises, social, economical crisis, sanitary crisis, environmental. And the environmental specifically, I believe that it's going to become more and more important in our reality throughout the world. So this has gave us the need of identifying new products for the prevention, management, and resolution of crisis and conflicts, and also has generated a demand for alternative models on leading. So who is gonna lead and mitigate and prevent the conflict? What are the leading models that are being used currently, and how is that with the participation and the women, we can have interpellations on these different leading roles with new ideas, new experiences that we can provide to them. So these are part of the reflections on the agenda of women, peace, and security as for right now. As I said, we have an important reduction of armed conflict. Traditionally, as we understand it, interstate state conflict, also an increase on more conflicts that include violence, include polarization at a social level. And this is because of lack of equality on all of the manifestations that it's still important in all of the countries of this continent, right? So this lack of equalities are amplified because of a series of realities, including organized crime, including transnational crime, proliferation of guns and weapons, lack of democracy, the weaknesses of institutions and democracy, polarization, as we say, political and socially, but we also call it social conflict, destruction of environment due to climate change, losing lives, natural disasters on more vulnerable areas, and climate change, climate situations having less and less spaces for civil society, and violence against activists, the dependence of environmental issues, displacement have increased during the last years, and new threats such as the COVID-19 pandemic, as I mentioned already. So all of this series of situations make us question the police force, law enforcement, civilians that are part of the decision on the implementations of public policies. I mentioned this already, and building peace. And from CIM, our perspective is that the agenda gave us a framework to promote an effective response to all of these situations. We have the framework to promote participation of women in building peace, but also to prevent and to protect civilians from sexual violence, gender violence, and the conflicts. And when I talk about conflict, is not, as I was saying, the formal armed conflict, but the situations of conflict that we have seen throughout the continent during the last years. So this is for us a possibility to the reflection about the security. What is security? What is it for different parts of the population, including women, right? Who will provide you with this security? Who can guarantee security? How can we intervene? How can we question when women are not safe? This is a whole different process of different questions that we need to ask. What do we need to answer for peace and security? Because the unsafest place that we have for women currently is the household. Because of the mobilization, social situations, the greater violence for women is still in the household from their own partners. This is also an interesting question for us for the approach regarding resolution of conflicts. This generates for the police a role, but also for the armed forces, I think, for the understanding that is broader and deeper about what security means for people, specifically when we're seeing reduction of armed conflicts at a more formal level. We're not seeing the presentation. I'm sorry, we cannot see the presentation. So yeah. To wrap up, I apologize for the black screen. Let me just maybe wrap up my presentation.
Okay, listo.
Right.
Creo que ya volvió, ¿no?
Hilary, ahí está volviendo.
I'm sorry, Hilary. We are ready for the conclusions. So all of this process of reflection internally on the way OAS about security, as I was saying, part of the adoption in the Americas that we adopted in 2003, there was experiencing the change, the reduction of formal armed conflict, some other sources of conflict, including environmental degradation and climate change. We have reflect on the OAS about our role towards the approach of this situation. And truly, we have identified many strategic stakeholders internally on the OAS. And for us, this is the Inter-American Defense Board, of course, and IDB just appointed someone that is responsible for gender. This is the point of contact for us. We have a liaison with IADB. This is something that we also have with some other institutions, such as the Secretariat for Democracy, multidimensional safety, and the different dependencies and sectors, the departments that the Secretariat has. And we have different roles on the approach of women, peace, and security. Historically, this is something that happens nationally. We have been working on different niches. We have been working on clusters. We have our environment. We have specific topics, and very rarely we have coordinated for a general or broader approach of the situation on the hemisphere and what's the role of the agenda of women, peace, and security. So we have, during the last years, building the bridges internally with OAS, including the Inter-American Defense Boards. I mentioned this already, for the articulation of a work agenda. And this is the main objective that we have after the reflection process on same during the last years, a proposal, alternative proposal to coordinate the clusters and to see more holistically the approach of women situation and the specific role of the agenda of women, peace, and security.
sigo enviando la presentación, pero quisiera agradecerles de nuevo a la Fuerza Aérea de Chile y a la Junta
Thank you
Interamericana de
to the
Mujeres
Armed Forces of Chile
acompañarnos el día de hoy.
for the invitation. Thank you to the board, and thank you for your attention.
Muy bien, Hilary, muchas gracias por tu excelente y completa presentación, sobre todo
Thank you, Hilary. Thank you for your great presentation. It's important for us to know what the Commission is doing from the perspective of OAS. So thank you. So for the next presentation,
me complace presentar una vez más a Julia Moria Turner.
we have Julia Mohan Turner. As you can see in the biography, we have different studies that she has been part of. What's important for this presentation is the operation experience that she has. She has been in Bosnia and Herzegovina, she has been in Afghanistan, and she's going to talk from her personal perspective and from her experience. So thank you.
Gracias, and good morning, bon dia, buenos días a todos, señoras y señores.
Ladies and gentlemen,
English, if it's okay. Let me start sharing my slides. Just one moment, please. Okay, I hope you are able to see. Okay.
Sí, Dewey, we can see you perfectly. So yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Once again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and what a pleasure to be here today with thousands of professionals in the profession of arms. So congratulations for participating. What I would like to do today is share some insights on gender perspectives in armed conflict. While I recognize that there's a broad range of issues, both for men and for women in our forces, one area that stands out when we discuss gender inclusion, gender perspectives, is women in combat. Also, women in highly tactical environments such as border security and peacekeeping. So what I would like to do is share some of my personal experiences, including deployments to hot zones and numerous tactical exercises, where I had the opportunity to gain firsthand understanding of the dynamics of gender, much due to the fact that often I was the only woman in the room or the only woman in a tactical setting. So let's get started. What I have come to understand in my 25 years serving is that the inclusion of women does enhance military performance at all levels. Historically, American women and women truly across the world have served in various capacities during armed conflict. But most serving in quote-unquote supporting roles, despite that many of them have had a significant presence and roles in battlefields. Even making the ultimate sacrifice, such as here, my dear friend Roz, who was killed in action in 2009 in Afghanistan, and who I would like to honor her sacrifice in a very respectful way today. And despite all that, surprisingly, it was not until December 2015 when the Department of Defense allowed for women to serve in all roles, including combat roles with no exceptions, no restrictions. This idea is actually very simple. If a woman can perform at the same standards, no compromises, and be qualified for certain tactical combat jobs, then she should be able to serve. This is not rocket science. That's a pretty simple implication. And since the roles have opened for women combat roles, we have seen since 2016, the roles were open in 2015, 2016, the inclusion without restriction starts, and we have seen a gradual but mostly a steady increase in women serving in these positions, from aviation, air defense, even special forces. These roles are exceptionally demanding, require extraordinary talent and skills in multiple domains. And once again, if a woman qualifies, then she has been able to earn her place among the best by merit, not by favor. And here are some other examples that I would like to share of women in operational hostile environments, showcasing their exceptional skills, leadership, and impact across various military roles. The top left is in the flight suit, Colonel Alison Black. Her nickname is Angel of Death. She is a genius in aviation. She's feared for her operational abilities that she demonstrated in the AC-130 gunship in Afghanistan. And still in this context of women in aviation, and largely acknowledging, because we have so many participants from Chile's Air Force, is that women pilots, the data shows from military safety reports and also highlighted in a Time magazine article, the data shows that women aviators are statistically less likely to be involved in aviation accidents than their male counterparts. Again, the inclusion of women is not a zero-sum game, but I think these are important and relevant items to discuss. Now, moving to ground operations, female engagement teams, here you see the women that are actually engaging with the population. They're crucial for military operations. These women are building relationship with local populations in areas that perhaps our male counterparts, our male service members may face cultural barriers. So even in my own experience, long before the implementation of female engagement teams, you can see on the left side, when I was in Bosnia at a shelter with orphans and widows, and I do believe that my presence there as a woman brought a certain degree of comfort and trust, allowing the women in particular to share their stories with me. Later in Afghanistan, while engaging also with the population, distributing some food, these types of engagements, we are getting closer to the population and offering the best that we have in a non-threatening way that can build trust. I think that is important to highlight as well that there is often a perception that during armed conflict, all we do is kick doors and explode, blow up things. But the truth is that hostile environments are far more complex, with vulnerable populations that are often caught in the middle. So for the success of military operations, our success really depends on our ability to quickly adapt, to understand, and to respond to diverse needs. And we can only do that if we have a diverse and if we have our best talent. Okay, so now I would like to highlight some of the arguments that all of us, many of us have heard, the arguments and the counter arguments about women serving in combat. Perhaps the most obvious one is that we hear is that women are weaker than men. People who believe this will argue that women that combat requires a high level of physical strength that most women do not have, potentially putting themselves and their fellow soldiers at risk. And of course, we have to acknowledge there are biological differences between women and men, but also there is a significant overlap of physical abilities. Many women are capable of meeting and often exceeding the same physical standards as men. The woman here on the left is a teammate. Her name is Army Major Kimberly Quinn. To me, she is one of the best officers I ever worked with. Obviously, very fit. She is ready. Readiness at the front, truly combat ready, and I would have no hesitation to have her in a tactical environment. Moreover, we also have to acknowledge that the dynamics of modern warfare has changed, and it goes way beyond hard power. Many combat roles today involve advanced technology, strategic thinking, resilience, and many other skills that are not necessarily tied to the physical prowess of a person. So women have shown themselves qualified to be in these hostile environments physically, professionally, and really performing at the highest elite levels. Okay, here's another argument that women can be a distraction for cohesion of specialized units. And the truth that studies have showed that mixed gender units perform equally well, if not better, than single gender units. As I mentioned, I have been often the only woman in a tactical setting. In my experience, all it boils down to professionalism. As long as the team is professional, as long as each individual performs at the highest levels, there should be no issues. Another argument is that women gets pregnant, that we get pregnant, and that impacts mission readiness. Here in the United States, our policies are increasingly more supportive to ensure that we have readiness and retainability, both of mothers and fathers. Here on the bottom right is Colonel Sid Lars, the first woman jumper in the weather career field. You can see here on the top and in the image above, she was pregnant at one point when she was my boss, my chief, and then she had her baby. Eventually, she went to Bosnia, and no issues. Again, she was the first woman jumper in the weather career field. Highly motivated. She retired as a decorated colonel in the United States Air Force, and her legacy continued. I have also, when I was in the uniform, I had children. I still do have 2 wonderful boys. I served honorably, and everything is fine. So there is really no issues when it comes to that argument. Finally, it's romantic relationships and sexual dynamics that disrupt the trust and the closeness that we need among service members. Again, I keep highlighting this. It comes to professionalism and leadership. In these photos, I am in Bosnia. This is not my boyfriend by any means. This is my colleague, is my peer. Here we're doing reconnaissance, identifying and apprehending illegal armaments such as projectiles and weapons. This is about having the understanding of our values and performing at the highest levels, staying focused on the mission. Some also say that women in tactical scenarios is not possible because of logistical issues. There's no bathrooms, no installations. Adjustments for women in the military in general are impractical. Again, this is not true. The adjustments that are required to accommodate women in military facility are, for the most part, minimum. The cost of adapting infrastructure, such as creating a private sleeping area or a bathroom, represents, when we look at, particularly in the United States, when we look at the defense budget, it's minimal, it's a fraction. And I know from my experience also that even when there is absolutely no accommodations, it is possible to have co-ed environments where mutual respect is at the center and front, is at the front and center. I personally had to sleep in tents, share the space in tactical spaces with no bathrooms and no showers. My teammates supported me, respected me, and I did the same for them. When it is also in this environment here that we have to acknowledge that, yes, there is a possibility of harassment and gender violence when we're working in close quarters. And that's why we have to address these critical issues pre-deployment. And we must ensure that there's zero tolerance for anything that happens in this nature. So yes, when it comes to gender perspectives in the military and combat, much has changed since the time that I joined as a young woman in 1997. Here you see on the top left my early days when I am still learning how to assemble and disassemble an M16. And on the bottom, when was my last day of duty, my retirement ceremony officiated by a 4-star general, General Laura Richardson, who is a decorated pilot with combat, parachute, and air assault badges. So a lot has changed in those 25 years. When I was deployed to Bosnia, for instance, I was the only American woman at a NATO camp. What I noticed in that setting is that my fellow male counterparts did not know how to behave around me. What they saw first was a woman when they saw me entering a room or a space. And they saw first a woman, and then they saw the professional of arms. So sometimes, not knowing what to do, they would bring me a flower or flirt or make a awkward comment. And I think for me, what was most difficult during that time is that sometimes I would walk into a space and there would be photos of naked women on the walls or even on the screensavers. that was definitely embarrassing to me and incredibly inappropriate. So I had to navigate through this and perform regardless of how I felt about it. It was normal to them and uncomfortable to me. But at the end of the day, what I really wanted is that they saw me as a peer, as a professional. So then when I went to Afghanistan years later, the environment was different. It was more professional. There was no tolerance whatsoever for disrespectful comments or degrading photos around the work environment. There were also a lot more service women. So in terms of gender perspectives, we were already focusing on how to protect the most vulnerable population, women, seniors, and children. So that, to me, showed a lot of progress in the tactical environment. So how do we create progress? How do we grow as a force? How do we become better? Well, it's all about leadership and training. Here in those images, that was my last year in uniform in 2022. This is a multinational.
Louis?
Exercise straight winds.
Guess we
in
lost
this particular
at least your
exercise
audio.
here, we have
I still
operational
see
and
your screen, but
file.
I hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Loud and
Okay.
clear.
Okay, thank you. I can hear you well. I can see, so I'm not sure what happened. Can you tell me where you lost me, please?
We just saw when you start talking about the slide that you have on the screen right now.
Okay, so what I was alluding to is that how do we create progress when we look at the inclusion of women, meaningful inclusion of women, and also the ban on restrictions for combat? And in my opinion, this happens through leadership and training. I was mentioning that here in these images, what you see is my team, we were sharing best practices in really providing training on gender perspectives on tactical environments here 5 miles into the Belizean jungle, talking about how we can be better professionals and look at different gender perspectives in those in hostile environments. You can see Colombia and Mexico representation from elite units, from special forces and ground forces. And what really stood out to me during this event is that these men, they really understood the impact of gender perspectives because they had to deal with it day in and day out. So they're excellent champions, and really it shows that the integration of women in combat, integration of women in our forces is not a women's issue. It takes all of us. So in terms of my profession, for 18 years, I was a weather technician and a meteorologist before I retrained into military diplomacy. Women have served as weather observers and forecasters since World War II, playing a crucial role in operations. In my career, I worked in space weather, helicopters. I supported fixed wings, and even Air Force One for President Barack Obama. But one point in my career, I wanted to be a Gray Beret. Gray Berets, as you can see here, this gentleman at the top left, he's wearing it. The Gray Berets, they are weather specialists who receive unique combat training. They jump, they repel.
Joey, lost your audio again?
They know how to scope and evade. At the time, I was Gray Berets, and even though I was there in the same combat weather unit performing the same job as the rest of my peers, I did not think I could be a Gray Beret. I had never seen a Gray Beret woman. But this has changed. And here you can see front and center, the first African-American Gray Beret, 20 years, and there she is. It is possible. So what I would like to conclude is that I would like to remember this. Please remember this. The key factors for combat effectiveness and tactical engagement are leadership and training quality. It's not gender composition. It's about talent, it's about commitment, and it's about merit. I hope that I leave this message loud and clear. Again, it is a huge pleasure. It is an honor to be here with all of you. Congratulations to the Inter-American Defense Board and Chile Air Forces. What you do matters, and it's exactly events like this that we need to provide the knowledge to push this forward, to have a more prepared and more professional forces. I also want to congratulate every participant. I think is almost 12,000 and growing. So thank you for taking the time and for developing this skill to become a better professional of arms. Before I finish, I would like to give a quick shout out to the Women in International Security and the Jack Gordon Institute's Women, Peace and Security Forum, who I proudly represent today. Thank you so much. Much respect to all of you.
Okay, Dewey, thank you very much for your complete presentation and, of course, for showing us how it's possible to advance and to demolish some of those stereotypes that at the beginning maybe was hard for you, but now you went through and succeed. So thank you again, Dewey. Muy bien, ahora para todos los que nos están...
For all those that are listening to us online, we're going to have a break, a 30-minute break, and we're going to leave you accompanied by videos of both of the IADB as well as of the Air Force of Chile so that you can get to know us better. We come back in 30 minutes. Thank you.
¿Qué nos hace volar? ¿Qué hace que empecemos cada día con energía y pasión? Nos moviliza Chile y su gente. De norte a sur, de mar a cordillera. Aterrizando en territorio insular y haciendo patria en las profundidades de la Antártica. 12.000 mujeres y hombres, trabajando en equipo, preparados para esos cambios vertiginosos que trae aparejados este cuarto ya de siglo XXI. Atravesando los cielos de agitadas ciudades, enfrentando el ardiente desierto y los fríos vientos de la Patagonia Austral, custodiando en toda su extensión nuestro amplio espacio aéreo. Allí está la Fuerza Aérea de Chile. En ese escenario, fundamental resultan las personas que integran la institución, quienes se perfeccionan de manera permanente a través de programas de pregrado y posgrado en ciencias aeroespaciales, con apoyo de prestigiosas universidades, con el mejoramiento de la infraestructura educativa y la gestión de nuevos talentos, de manera de potenciar el proceso de selección a las escuelas matrices. Todo ello sumado al sistemático desarrollo de la ciencia e innovación, son la impronta de los aviadores militares del presente y futuro, los mismos que hoy ponen su vista y orientan su avión directo a las estrellas, una ruta que lleva a la Fuerza Aérea a renovar constantemente sus conocimientos, acordes con las más altas exigencias, moderna tecnología y sistemas de armas de última generación en beneficio directo del desarrollo del país y bienestar de cada uno de sus habitantes. Esta es la FACH de ayer, de hoy y de siempre. La misma que, gracias a sus capacidades estratégicas y la polivalencia de sus medios, se transforma en componente clave de la política de defensa nacional, generando disuasión para disfrutar la paz, que trae progreso y desarrollo. Aviadores militares en alerta permanente para ir en auxilio de quien lo necesite, con sus helicópteros y personal en rescates en la alta cordillera, en catástrofes naturales a lo largo del territorio nacional, con sus aviones en evacuaciones aeromédicas, trasladando forraje para animales a lugares donde sin el medio aéreo sería imposible llegar, colaborando activamente en el combate de incendios forestales y asesorando a la autoridad con información geoespacial. Esta es la Fuerza Aérea casi centenaria, a la que orgullosamente pertenecemos. Una institución de alas nobles y abiertas que hoy vuela a grandes alturas con auspiciosos y prometedores desafíos. Esta es la Fuerza Aérea de la Tecnología, la del profesionalismo a toda prueba, la del compromiso y rectitud, la del silencioso sacrificio y dedicación de mujeres y hombres que juraron dar la vida por Chile y por cada uno de sus habitantes. La Fuerza Aérea de Chile que toma altura en sostenido vuelo hacia un promisorio futuro, directo a las estrellas.
Bien. Retomamos entonces la agenda de
Okay,
nuestro...
so we're going to start right back with our agenda, with our seminar. We want to thank everyone and all of the comments that we have received through our Zoom platform, through YouTube. And thank you for the congratulations. We have around 12,000 people that have enrolled. Please continue sending comments. Tomorrow we will read some of them. We will talk about the presentations. So we're going to continue with today's agenda. We are going to be talking about the justice and the approach on gender. This is going to be led by someone that is very important for us. It's General Paula Carrasco Borges. She is a part of the group of auditors of the Air Force. General Carrasco, the floor is yours.
Nos volvió loca la presentación. Fui yo, parece. Bueno, muy buenos días. Yo soy la general Paula Carrasco de la Fuerza Aérea, auditora general. Hoy día voy a presentarles un tema que espero que sea del agrado de todos ustedes, la justicia militar y los desafíos del enfoque de género. Son temas desafiantes, por lo tanto vamos a partir con algunas ideas al respecto. Como les dije, vamos a ver algunas generalidades, algunos conceptos acotados acerca del derecho militar, de la judicatura militar, el sistema de justicia militar en términos muy generales, los fundamentos del enfoque de género en la función judicial en general y algunas ideas que me parecen relevantes respecto del enfoque de género en la judicatura militar. El derecho militar, no hay muchas definiciones de derecho militar en nuestra doctrina, pero hay un par de juristas, uno muy conocido nuestro, que es don Ricardo Coronado Donoso, que trabaja en la Fuerza Aérea, que escribieron un libro de derecho militar, y ellos lo definen como una rama del derecho público especial, nacional e internacional, que regula la organización y el funcionamiento ¿de qué? De los cuerpos armados y de todos sus integrantes, es decir, todos nosotros, para el adecuado cumplimiento de sus deberes y fines. Cuando hablamos de derecho militar, podemos distinguir tres áreas o ámbitos importantes. El primero de ellos es la jurisdicción penal militar, que es la que nos interesa para efectos de esta exposición. En segundo lugar, las normas administrativas en el ámbito militar, que es lo que hacemos nosotros los auditores todos los días en nuestro quehacer jurídico de asesoría, y disposiciones que regulan el ejercicio operacional de los cuerpos armados. Nos vamos a abocar someramente al sistema de justicia militar. El sistema de justicia militar, como ustedes bien saben, corresponde a un sistema jurídico de naturaleza castrense que regula dos cosas: la organización y el funcionamiento de los tribunales militares, tanto en tiempos de paz como en tiempos de guerra, también su procedimiento y la tipificación de determinados delitos de carácter militar y otros que son delitos generales. En Chile, el Código de Justicia Militar es muy antiguo, es del año 1925, es el más antiguo de toda Latinoamérica. Ese código de 1925 no es exactamente el código que rige hoy día, porque hoy día tenemos el código en un texto refundido, que es del decreto 2226 del año 1944, pero lo importante acá es que tenemos un código extremadamente antiguo y que sigue vigente, salvo algunas modificaciones relevantísimas que me gustaría poder darlas a conocer. La primera es la ley 20.477, del año 2010, y la otra es la ley 20.968 del año 2016. Ambas leyes lo que hacen, en definitiva, es restringir la competencia de los tribunales militares. ¿Y qué es lo que dice en definitiva? Y esta es una modificación relevante porque dice que en ningún caso los civiles y los menores de edad van a estar sometidos a los tribunales militares en ningún tiempo. El procedimiento de la justicia militar es un procedimiento que hay voces fuertes que dicen que requiere algunas modernizaciones, porque es un procedimiento escrito, es un procedimiento que hoy día lo tenemos en expedientes, a diferencia de todo el resto de los procedimientos que vemos en la justicia ordinaria. Es un procedimiento secreto en toda su parte investigativa, es inquisitorio, formalista y con un sistema de prueba muy reglado. En consecuencia, hoy día, si nosotros pensamos con cierta altura, claro que requeriría de algunas modificaciones, porque estamos frente a un procedimiento que requiere una digitalización, levantar esto de algunas medidas que son más bien poco garantistas, porque nuestro sistema procesal penal hoy día es un sistema muy garantista. A pesar de que la gente cree que los militares tenemos un sistema donde nos protegemos nosotros, en la práctica tenemos un sistema que es bastante poco garantista para los militares. Por lo tanto, requiere de cierto análisis y modificación que en su minuto se llevará a efecto. Los tribunales militares son tribunales que integran el Poder Judicial y por lo tanto, y son tribunales que están en la categoría de tribunales especiales en tiempos de paz. Entendí un poco esta conceptualización de la justicia, de la jurisdicción penal militar. Ahora vamos a ver algunas ideas y fundamentos del enfoque de género en la función judicial propiamente tal. El enfoque de género en materia judicial dice relación con aspectos muy relevantes que tienen que ver con evitar que en la conducción de la investigación y en la ponderación de la prueba las personas sean enjuiciadas con sesgos, con conceptos estereotipados.
The different stereotypes, the different roles.
Se les asignen por parte de la sociedad. Entonces, acá, ¿qué es lo importante? Acá debemos
So what we need is to give a new value to the construction for law. As we can see, there are important aspects on this regard, but this is something that is important for law. Gender is a category of the anecdotic information that it's back of 45 years, around 1980s, with a clear objective of lack of equality that we have against men and women, because we are coming from an Occidental, but not only Eastern culture that permits our ideas. We are not neutral. In the construction, there are a series of institutions, different structures that reinforce this lack of equality, that are also reflection of the judicial system, jurisdiction. We have, for the lawyers, men as a measurement, a good parent, protection of the families. And as a consequence, when we talk about gender approach, at a judicial level, we have different 5 aspects that we would like to highlight. We are all equal for law. We need to be impartial, non-biased, independent, our judges. Compliance of the international treaties is also one of them. 4th is the exercise of human rights. And 5th is access to justice. This is something that we will see in more detail. When we talk of equality towards justice, there are 2 important things to remember. First, we have equality on classic law, so to speak, formal law. That is the treatment. This is a juridical norm, juridical regulation. We have the right to vote, established in 1959, under a radical government, the possibility of voting in certain type of elections. This is formal equality. This is the first step because this is a law that is mandatory for this position. So therefore, men and women are considered equal on opportunities and for the but there's another concept that is also important, that is the material or substantive or real equality, evaluating the position, the subpositions of different factors such as gender, such as ethnicity, such as race, such as economical status. Classical is the right to vote. This is something that I always mention. Material will be the wages in the armed forces, public institutions, especially armed forces, I would say. There's a remuneration that is unique. A captain will earn the same if it's a man or a woman, but this is not the case in the civilian world, because in certain sectors, this is very generalized, that the quality of the job will determine certain conditions, certain considerations when we evaluate individually the remuneration. Women are not earning the same as men. This is an important percentage. The same happens. I'm not the case because I'm old, but when we are having children, when we are becoming mothers, and your employee needs to consider you for a job, for a position, for an important position within the organization, normally what will happen is the comment, the analysis has to do with, or she will become pregnant, she will be on maternity leave, so on and so forth. So you're not considered for the position, considered for the job, because of these situations, because of the maternity leave. This is the reality. This is a reality. This has been changing. It's changing quite slowly, but it's something that we need to consider. When we talk about material equality, this is the type of equality that we're talking about. Second element that has to do with the gender approach is to play in favor of the judicial system, is to have independent judges. This means that to be non-biased as a judge on your decisions, you need to avoid actions that are in favor of a certain gender, and that you're judging with objectivity and reasonable. Third element, as we mentioned already, is the international treaties, or are the international treaties. Instruments that have been ratified by Chile, so part of our national legislation. There's an important convention, is CEDAW. We mentioned CEDAW already in previous presentations, has to do with the Convention on Elimination of all type of discrimination against women. This is a primary tool at a juridical level, international, of course, of international women's rights, that it's binding, it's mandatory, and has certain principles that can be accepted at an international level on this specific topic, stressing that is for women throughout society. For instance, CEDAW, it's a convention that Chile subscribed in the 80s. The General Assembly of the United Nations in 1979 approved it. A year afterwards, we subscribed, and the decree is of 89. Fourth, important already, in favor of the judicial exercise and the exercise of human rights. Gender perspective, it's a tool, and it's a tool of methodology that can help us to determine different impact between the decisions and the measurements for men and women. without the benefit directly for women. This is binding for equality, living without arbitrary discrimination, stereotypes, for certain structures of thinking. And because of this, we have different situations that can influence the decisions of the judges, the ponderation, the qualification. This is why the court or the judges can at certain points analyze evidence and without stereotypes. They need to be qualifying the facts without any bias. At an international level, Inter-American level, we have the Inter-American Convention to Prevent, Sanction, and Eradicate Violence Against Women. This is Lendo Para, 1994, that established different things. But one of the important things and that are important for us on the jurisdiction is the states can modify certain judicial practices, constitutory as well, and also covers the appropriate trial. The opportunity on a judicial procedure, it's very important, because if it's not appropriate, a complaint, a sentence, the results are not going to be effective. And this last topic that we have on the convention is extremely relevant, because it determines that education and training of the personnel of the justice system needs to be there. This is relevant. It's important to mention that definitely we are coming from this culture that I mentioned already, something that is anecdotic. It's throughout our lives. It's embedded in our lives, life of human beings. So if we don't continue to train ourselves, to educate ourselves, to understand without bias on gender, the administration of justice, this is something that is not going to be effective. And this happens in the civil, but also in the social work. It happens as well in the judicial system. At the European Union level, we have the 99 Convention of Amsterdam that talks in one of the articles that one of the objectives is to fix the lack of equality against men and women, and to propose and to promote equality. It's a pretension, it sounds pretentious, but in the practice, this declaration on this Amsterdam Treaty, it's about the principles that can help us to change some realities. A fifth point on gender approach on the judicial system and its importance is the effective access to justice. The access to justice is a human right, and it's a mechanism to ensure some other rights. When you go to court and you want to recover or repair certain damage, to protect a minor that is under your safeguard, or to ask a court that can talk about the health matters. These are part of the rights that are associated to the access that we can have to justice with gender perspective. So in the practice, one of the main observations from the committee CEDAW is that women statistically do not have much access to courts. And whenever they have the access, or we have the access, there is a state that is very minimized of everything that we can take to the courts, or it's not considered. The justice at a certain point will not be appropriate. It's not free. When we have the barriers for the access to justice, that can be, for instance, judicial processes you cannot access because you don't have the way to pay a lawyer or a defendant. This is a barrier that we should consider. So on this perspective of the CEDAW committee, there's a concept that has to do with victimization or re-victimization, the diligence when you want to prove something. When you have an investigation, many times what can happen is that you will request to the victim to talk more about or with greater detail about anything that can re-victimize them and the facts that she's complaining about. And this is something that is generating this re-victimization trauma for the victim. It also happens on the diligences that has to do with meeting your victimary. You have to face them. This is not appropriate. Or you find the victimary in court. So this is also part of how we carry out the investigation. This is the concept of re-victimization or victimization in the second degree. Finally, I want to talk about certain ideas on the gender approach on military justice. When we talk about military jurisdiction, it's always about the competencies to know the crimes. And we know about this, it's referring to the criminal right. And in criminal right, it's also important to consider the gender approach for the investigation, as I explained already, but also in the resolution of the cases. Sexual cases, when we have gender violence, and you have a military degree that can refer to different types of violence as well. I have an example of something that has to do with mistreating, and this is a gender approach. This is a military case, military organization, two instructors, a man and a woman, and a group of soldiers that are on operation. They are running. This is part of the operation. The male instructor, at a certain point, very typically, as you will know, will sing something that is considered sexual, and everyone is laughing. They start laughing. Everyone finds it funny. And there's only one woman, that is the female instructor. The female instructor is becoming uncomfortable, provoked. She's looking at, and a soldier is looking at her directly, staring. And when something more sexual is coming in the song, they're laughing and provoking the female instructor. And she is very mad. She is upset, and she calls her attention of the soldier. And it's not appropriate. Using bad words because the patient, he was being explicit, she was being stared at, and she was uncomfortable. There comes a complaint, formal complaint. You know that mistreating one of the soldiers in any type of this scenario, this is a complaint. It does not require any type of physical violence. When it's investigated with the gender approach, you will find an evaluation and a consideration of the circumstances and the evidence that at the very end that will make you understand that the female instructor was provoked, was upset, and that it was too explicit. So beyond the administrative sanction, and the criminal realm will be. This is just an example to talk about any type of scenarios having on your investigation the gender perspective. or considering the gender perspective in your investigation. It's pertinent because the armed forces are part of doctrine, discipline, hierarchy, generating a duty, respect that needs to be observed by the different areas of all of the hierarchy. So when you have diligences on the investigation, you give your sentence, you should always consider your gender approach to avoid bias, to avoid the bias influencing the way on how you follow your diligences and your sentence. The work that we do in the armed forces is teamwork permanently. So respect and trust are extremely important. If not, we cannot go to war. So members of the armed forces complying in mission need to be focused on the teamwork with trust and with respect. If there's unfair justice, gender discrimination, this will directly impact the efficiency of the operation. This can be magnified when at the judicial level you don't have resolutions that are in accordance of the situation. If you complained on the military justice, any type of justice, but we're talking about the military. So let's think about military justice. When you complained about certain issues, you hope to have a trial that is without bias, with independence for the treatment of the investigation. So there's a loss that you can experience. So there's important to be prepared, to be effective on your trial to conduct the investigation. An expert from Costa Rica mentioned that the judges need to be trained on gender perspective as part of the initial training throughout the career as well, permanently. So we can have awareness on the active role that you must have a public official to eliminate all discrimination, all bias, integrating the work that you do on the operation of certain human rights treaties. She's an attorney, a very well-known attorney from Costa Rica. So in this sense, says the safeguarding certain juridical specials that are on the hierarchy of the military to protect sovereignty. This is our main mission. Therefore, the prosecutor, the judge, should be also part of this. They also have to comply with the fundamental rights, and they should not enter into stereotypes. They should have a holistic approach. This is a very important idea. Regulation, as I mentioned a few years ago, as human thinking, it's not neutral. Therefore, the work of the judge is to interpret it, to apply it permanently, defining how you qualify the facts, constantly looking to avoid bias and the behavior that you expect from the service without the stereotypes, to make sure that we have equality in law, responsibility, and discipline. So the current challenges that we have in society are also part of the judicial system, military level. For us, this is a challenge. We need commitment, education, work, training, public policies, but also a cultural change. And we know that we need to move forward on that change. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, General, for this amazing presentation, for talking about the gender perspective on the justice application, it's very relevant. And in the spirit of the seminar, the idea is to share the experiences of the institutions, of the countries, for the ones that are working their pathway, so they can also foster and be aware of these initiatives. Next, we are going to talk about how we can advance on the incorporation of women and how can we keep them inside the military institutions. This is the responsibility of Commander Varela, very well trained at an international level, participating in peace operations, India, Pakistan. So his presentation has also this part of the personal experience that is very important for us. The floor is yours. Thank you for your presentation.
Good morning. This is a title that is quite challenging and complex to achieve. We're working on this. It is not something that is complete. It is something that the institution is advancing on. The almost 100 years of life of the Air Force, we have been advancing and we have been maturing in different areas. And the institution has always been integrated by persons that have certain features, specific and special ones, like being an adventurer, people that like challenges, that do not admit limits, to be able to reach the objectives that they have set. People like Commodore Benitez and Marcos Duarte that set forth the national aeronautics to conquer the space and the aeronautic routes. In our life cycle, we have seen ourselves changing the attitude of how the institution faces different advancements or has maintained itself in time. We started not in 1930. The Air Force started before with a process of change in the world where we started seeing that the air power could effectively have things done that were not achievable on land. So this change in war also caused some social changes. And in 1930, we started with the Air Force in a formal manner in our country. And then we had a period that is called conformity, but I would call it a consolidation period on the employment of the air power and the different connections and routes of our country by air. This period was quite long. We could say that it was until the last days of the 20th century, but in the 90s, we saw some important changes. The world was evolving slowly at that time, but in the 90s, the important changes started. We launched satellites and we had different important things happening in our institution. But together with the change of the century, we had the registration of the new female officers in the different specialties of the Air Force. In the next years, in the social changes and technological changes were quite fast, faster than in the last 60 years, in which the Air Force continued advancing. And in 2022-24, that we had another change area that was marked mainly by the command of the current commander, Hugo Rodriguez, where based on his command, he established 5 axes to advance and evolve the institution. with the different dimensions like governance, forest, science, education, and leadership, which is the subject that I'm going to talk about today. To be able to understand how we are advancing in the work that was done by this leadership model to evolve towards the future, first we will see what the leadership model that was stated and that was accepted and is going to be implemented by the Center of Leadership of the Air Force, the institutional values that are the basis for an inclusive and conscious leadership. The leadership strategies to be able to achieve high performance standards, and then some final comments. The model of leadership that was proposed and accepted to be implemented in the institution by the Leadership Center is constituted by 6 elements. The first one is the attributes of the people themselves, how each one of us is, and the things that we bring in our genes, and the ones that were inherited from our families, like character, presence, intelligence. And the second are the personality features, how we have been able to develop and advance, and how we behave, and how we have relationships with the rest of the human beings. Then we have the skills, innate and born skills, and the ones that were taught to us through the different instructions, and also how we have been evolved through our experience. The leadership styles. This model does not establish a leadership style for the staff of the Air Force, but says that there are different leadership styles, from the most authoritative to the ones that laissez-faire, or the most laid down, and that leaders have to be able to adapt themselves to the different styles of leadership and the different situations, both simple and complex, that they could face while they perform their duties. The principles and values of the institution that are the ethos of the military life. And then the last one, which is emotional intelligence, that allows us to be able to obtain the greatest yield from our teams and to have people that are adapted to the work that they carry out. The fundamental basis, as I said before, to implement this leadership model is the ethos of the military life. The ethos that is sustained and based on the 4 values, the 4 fundamental values of our institution: honor, loyalty, duty complied with, and the excellence in the service. And each one of these will be seen separately, where we will be able to see the stress that we are requesting those that perform these values, and what it is demanded from leaders, and what is that we achieve when we comply with the demands of these values. Honor. Honor stresses on the behavior, commitment, and the integrality of the person themselves. And what it demands that leaders treat all the members of his or her organization without any categorization or classification, and with respect and tolerance. What does this allow us? It allows us to have equal treatment and a dignified treatment within our organization. And besides, it generates a commitment, and that persons go forward with the duties that are given to them. An example, a real example of this value is the swearing into the flag that all the military aviators do when they start. In this graduation ceremony, both for the aviation school where the officers graduate, and as well as the specialty school where we have the service staff, The culminant point of this celebration is the swearing into the flag, where each one of the military aviators swear to serve loyally to their country, even at the risk of their lives, if necessary. And for a human being, this is the ultimate sacrifice, to give his life to be able to comply with his tasks or the duties that they have with their country in this case. The loyalty that stresses on the teamwork, this core, the spirit du corps, and the preservation of the group. What does this demand from the leaders? That they must generate an environment of support in their teams. And besides this, they should not categorize, and they should be inclusive with each one of the members, regardless of their condition, sex, religion, or any of the categories or vignettes that we usually give people. What can we achieve with this? We magnify the morale and the performance of the teams and their yield. This link and this magnification of morale within our staff is represented by the Medal of Courage. The institution has granted 43 of these medals after an investigation. But the greatest majority of medals in one sole category has been delivered to 16 military aviators, and that is having risked their lives to save or rescue a comrade that was in danger due to an air accident or maybe a high voltage. But there are 16 military aviators that risked their lives to be able to save another person from their teams. So here we demonstrate with this high index of the delivery of medals of honor that the cohesion that exists in our teams and the way that we teach is working, and that there is an intrinsic loyalty within our work teams. Compliance with duty stresses on the compliance with the obligations, dedication, and sacrifice. What does the leader need to do or is demanded? It has to convince its staff, that the staff has to understand that the work that they're carrying out is and contributes directly to the compliance with the mission. And in the same way, recognize the effort and the sacrifice of the people as in such a way that they can achieve a feeling of commitment and purpose. A feeling of commitment and purpose towards the compliance with the mission. As many of you know, the Air Force has different bases in the Antarctic continent. In 2014, I was designated as commander of the base called Teniente Carvajal, that is located near 800 kilometers south to the island Frey, that is quite isolated and that is crewed by myself under my commander by 12 people. 12 people with different specialties, because we had from commanders, carpenters, nurses, electricians, all the necessary specialties to be able to have the base work and to comply with our mission. And besides this, we had a different age range from 26 to 65. So the group, different to what we are used to, was not homogeneous. On the contrary, it was absolutely heterogeneous. And you can imagine the different personalities with which we all worked. So it was the first time that there was one woman among the crew, the second in command. And she was a nurse, Sub-Officer Rollis. And the interesting thing about this work, it was an heterogeneous group, for the way that we work in isolated places instead of placing problems. This work generates different opinions and points of view and makes work simpler. The different ages, the different specialties could seem a problem, but on the contrary, it facilitates our work. But what I wanted to say is that when we were in the pre-deployment phase, despite she was the first woman in the crew, every time that I introduced the team, they asked me something that was quite simple. Like they asked me, how are you going to do this in just 1 year? And the answer was the same thing that the commander said, we're going to place a post. But what I wanted to tell with this anecdote is that we never questioned the professional capacity of the first women, or why if a woman would be a problem or if she would or would not be able to comply with her work. The only question was the bathroom. From the personal point of view, I think that that is a great advancement within the institution, because they never questioned her skills, but it was rather something that was a structural issue. And it was an excellent experience. We were 6 months in this base, and we were able to comply with all the tasks that we had to carry out without any accident. Excellence in service emphasizes the professionalism, the dedication, and the continuous improvement. Continuous improvement that is a responsibility both of the staff, but the leader as well, where the leader has to be concerned about the professional development and also the personal growth and development of his followers in such a way that he can reach the maximum potential of his people and contribute to the success and the compliance with the mission. The example that I am going to give you of excellence in service is related to the performance of our institution throughout its history in peacekeeping missions. We've had teams deployed in the Middle East, Africa, America, and Asia. All have complied with their tasks in an exceptional manner, and we've never had any member that has to be repatriated. So this talks very well about the professionalism and dedication of our staff. From the missions in Haiti that we carried out with mixed contingents, and that were also able to comply with their mission with no problem. Right now, we have an active mission in Colombia with the participation of male and female officers. In my personal experience, I was not deployed with a national contingent, but my experience was in Umogip in India, Pakistan, where the team was comprised of 42, 43 military observers, and 25 and 30% of the observers were female, and from 10 countries that are part of the mission. A territory that was very complex culturally speaking and religiously speaking, with many internal conflicts, which instead of generating problems within the teams themselves, these mixed teams, on the contrary, generated the facility to be able to carry out the task, the delivery of the different points of view, as I said before, because many of our tasks were investigative, and the different points of view were very important, that allowed us to reach the best end to the investigations that we had to do. And on the other hand, from the personal point of view, we always had to support our team colleagues, because the scenario for them as women the scenarios were less friendly than for the men of the team. So we generated a greater cohesion within the team of observers. Within the work that the leadership axis has carried out, we have developed some strategies for the reaching some high standards. From the inclusive point of view, eliminate gender stereotypes, establish equality policies, work against the discrimination and conscience biases, and highlight reference and models, female ones, and the teamwork that I said before generates a better perspective with different points of view and a better result in all the teams. From the point of view of our consciousness, the flexible schedules and paternal licenses promote the culture of rest and connection in such a way that when we have to deploy our people and enter into complex scenarios, our staff is in the condition, a psychological condition, to be able to perform well. Programs of mentoring and coaching, and finally, program work team activities and integration activities so that our staff can get to know themselves better and develop different skills to the ones that are normally carried out in their job positions. What is the purpose? Well, to strengthen the teams and the organization, to retain talent, to generate balanced environments, and to improve the organizational climate, and to establish a focus on competencies for the designation of the different positions and duties. And finally, and in conclusion, the institutional values of honor, loyalty, compliance of your duties, and excellence in the performance are the basis of their force and its own character. And this means that they are the guide in the behavior and conduct of their staff. To integrate all these values to the leadership is essential to promote a culture of diversity, equality, and inclusiveness in the organization. Maintaining these values, the leaders of the Air Force will be able to develop and thrust a culture of respect, professionalism, teamwork that will benefit both the organization as well as the staff of the institution. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Juan Tevera, for this presentation, for sharing how the Air Force of Chile is trying to advance in this center of leadership and to retain talent, and to thank you for sharing the experience of how you face a situation where where to go to the bathroom and not to question the skills of the people. To continue, we're going to move to a new topic, a different topic that has to do with the defense policy and gender equality, and on the line that the Undersecretary of Defense talked about with regards to how we have advanced in the gender perspective within our Ministry of National Defense. This presentation is going to be given by Paula Gonzalez, who is a person that has a great experience in public administration, and she has worked in the Ministry of Defense for a long time, and she has supported us in all these instances, like last year in the same seminar on women and security. She talked to us from Chile to have the largest amount of participants. So it is a pleasure for me to introduce her. And Paula, please explain us about the defense policy and gender equality.
Good morning. Can you hear me well? Thank you. So my name is Paula Gonzalez. As the commander mentioned, I am part of the Defense Ministry as an assessor, gender advisor, actually. And I am going to talk about everything that we do, the work that we developed, and to talk about everything that we have done on the integration of women and gender approach. I'm trying to share my screen. And there it is.
Sí, Paula, perfectamente.
Perfecto. Entonces voy a la presentación. Bueno.
So yeah.
Primero que todo,
First,
es importante señalar
I think that it's important to mention that when we talk about the equality policies and integration of women to defense, it's not only from the will or good disposition. Right? We think that it's important to have women, first of all, because we are half the population. Globally, we are more than 8,000 million, according to the last census, so 50.5% are men and 50% are women. So according to the statistic group, the census, we are going to be 20 million inhabitants according to the last information. There's a small difference to the world population because in Chile, we are the majority, 51% in Chile and 49% of men. This is in Chile. It's not a competence. It's just how it is. Now, women, although it's true, 50% of the world population, and this is the case in most of the countries.
¿Podrías poner tus slides en modo presentación, por favor?
Perdón, los tengo en modo presentación.
We are going to check something about the presentation. To verify we can improve the way that we see the presentation or the screen that is being shared.
Voy nuevamente a modo presentación. Ahí estoy. Me devuelvo. Ahí estoy. ¿Lo ven bien?
Sí, online se está viendo bien. Me informan que online se ve bien acá. Lo vemos en la pantalla normal nomás, pero por favor adelante.
We can continue then with the presentation. So,
de presentación slide. Bueno, lo que les decía que las mujeres, si bien somos el 50%.
So going back to the percentage of the population, we don't have much participation due to many things. Men are not 100% of the population. However, they do have a 70%, generally speaking, 70% of participation compared to a 50% in women. In Chile, we have been increasing the percentage on the labor market during the last 20 years, particularly during the last 20 years, and we are in a 52.6%. However, we still have a gap of 19%. From the capabilities, we are not making the most of the talent. Gender equality. I'm not going to talk about the need of having this equality because General Carrasco talked in much depth about this and also in some of the other presentations. So I just want to touch on the importance of gender approach. It's not only a problem that has to do with justice. It's not only for the development approach, but it's a strategic need because we need to have all of the talents that are available for justice, peace, security, and development. The challenges that we have because of the new world reality make us or force us to look different ways to include all of the expertise and all of the talents. So we consider that this gap of 19%, considering the percentages that we have in labor market, we have a huge way to contribute to the development of our countries. In Chile, we're not starting from scratch. We're not in zero. We have the fortune to have women throughout. I mean, in the independence process, some very well known, some the history has made anonymous. And this is a painting of Pedro Subercason of the Nairobi battle. This is important because my coup battle, among other things, was only won because of the capacity of the armed forces, independent armed force at that time, because of the ammunitions, and many women participated, children as well, but women participated on the fabrication or manufacturing weapons and ammunition. This is just a small data, anecdotic information that I consider important because the history of women, it's something that is not very well known because of many reasons, right? It's not something that we're going to talk about in greater detail right now, but we want to make it relevant. We want to mention the important roles of women throughout history, globally, and in the construction of our country mainly. Then we have cantineras. These are women that participated mainly during the 19th century on the Pacific War, 1879. But we used to have anecdotic information in the war against the Republic of Bolivia, where there was a woman that was very important. She has a very important role acknowledged by the government of the time. We have pilots during the 20th century. You can see the pictures that we have right now on screen, etc. Something important, we have the formal entrance of women in the armed forces. In 1974, with the creation of the School of the Armed Forces for Women, and this is how we started the process. Then the Air Force, the Army. This is when some of the women started entering formally to the lines. This is something that we also consider important. As the subsecretary mentioned during the opening remarks, we have 3 ministers and subsecretaries, female subsecretaries on our Ministry of Defense. In 2009, mentioned by the subsecretary as well, Chile was the first country of the region to formulate a national action plan to contribute with women, peace and security and the resolution 1325. Milestone, important as well, is that in 2017, we had the formulation of a law, a project of law, with the administration of former President Bachelet. These had certain consequences for the sustainability, for the career of women in the armed forces. In the armed forces, we have 21% of the women population. Nowadays, in the armed forces, 21% are women. And in civilian, on the defense services, Ministry of Defense, and the dependent services, women constitute 34.4% of the total population of the staffing. We have had more than 300 women participating since 1995 in peace operations. Milestone, we are very proud of it. And you can see on the screen how I placed the headline. This is something that we're very proud of as part of the ministry. Women overall, right? Particularly for women that are part of the Ministry of Defense, that the General Carrasco was appointed as the first general of the armed forces. We're very proud of that. I'm very excited. So I really apologize because every time that I mention this, I think that this is huge and this is very important and is an example for the future generations. Now, how can we move forward? First of all, for us, it's important to mention that as a country, we are part of the system of the United Nations, the ratification of the commitments that are relative to the Sustainable Development Objectives. One is the gender approach, such as the objectives for development. On gender equality, I would like to also highlight that what we're doing, we consider that is related to avoiding discrimination, eradicating discrimination around the world because of the work that we do on the Ministry of Defense internally, but also in the armed forces, but also the tasks and operations that we carry out when we have peace operations on protection of women on different sites. So for us, we are convinced that it is important to eliminate every type of violence against women. We should acknowledge the work that women do on households. This is part of the defense policy that we have fostered and adopted. We want to make sure that there's equality on the opportunities for leading at all levels, equality on the participation for women. And I will highlight as well how important it is to contribute on the use of technology, access to information and technology for the participation of women, but also the access in the world of science and technology. This is very important by how we have been discussing or having different conversations on defense, specifically on the Air Force. That I will actually like to take the time to congratulate for the work that they do on this topic. So along the same line of the Sustainable Development Objectives and regulations that Chile ratified, we consider that we need to continue moving forward to a tool that we know as cross-cutting gender approach. For us, this is not a single perspective. It's a methodological approach that helps us and mandate us to observe, to consider the interests, the expectations, the experiences as well of women, but men on the design, implementation, and evaluation of all of the policies and programs to develop. This is a methodology. It's not an active end, it's a methodology that we consider that is first useful to determine the impact of what we plan for men, but also for women. Then this contributes at the very end to have more equality. At the ministry level, we have an instance that we call inclusion table, that it's a national approach created in 2014 after our resolution. And this is a work that we do together with all of the institutions of the armed forces, but also the public services and organizations that are mandated by law, independent, and co-related to the Ministry of Defense. Therefore, the armed forces, the Air Force, the Subsecretariat, the Joint Forces, National Mobilization Table, and Civil Defense. We were together permanently, and the proposal has been of an agenda 23-25 under this administration that has 19 commitments that we have made on the Ministry of Gender Equality and Women. So it's official in the sector. Commitments that were worked out with, as I mentioned, after a consensus. And we always consider the observations of the institutions, but also we try to work with the characteristics that are more specific of each of the institutions, and according to the institutional culture. This is the way we believe for us to move forward. And as mentioned by the ministry, everything is always done with the work and help of the institutions. So again, these commitments, let me mention some of them. We have an international agenda for the gender approach. We have implemented the gender approach for the institutional planning tools, analyzing the budget with a gender approach, because we believe that this is essential and there's a space for the inclusion of this approach. There's a space to move forward without bias. We are also working and monitoring at a sectorial level against mistreating at a sexual labor level. We have a ministry for this. It's important to mention that since 2019, the armed forces of Chile have a joint protocol for the approach of these specific cases. And we received a monthly report of the situation of each of the complaints, and claims are always investigated through an administrative investigation, right? And in 2022, after the instruction of the Ministry of Defense, is that we started with the monitoring, and we started monitoring all of the ministries of defense, also the public services. And this is why, with the model of the permanent monitoring of the armed forces, we worked on a monthly monitor for all of the institutions. When we receive reports, we have been able to have an idea of the evolution of the situations, to be able to have the monthly monitoring information, and to apply common criteria. The results are very satisfying, I must say. And the complaints that we have received, honestly, I mean, the rate is very low, is 0.3%. Each of the years is changing and improving, and all of the institutions have implemented protocols for the performance whenever they have to face any of the situations. We started working since last year with the armed forces to create and design the training course, an e-learning virtual training to strengthen the prevention of the fight that we have violence against women. Next year, we will implement the training course for 100% of the personnel. This is going to be happening in 2024, but also 2025. This is one of the commitments that we have adopted. And this is something that we have to comply with the Ministry of Justice within the regulations of human rights mandated by law. Also, we are working on the efficient approach, the protocol for the efficient approach violence against women generally. As you can see on the slide that we have in train right now, talks about this specifically, prevention, for gender prevention. And we believe that gender violence affects all of the areas around the world, all of the institutions, all of the public and private sectors. This is a world problem. And we think that it's our responsibility to approach it because specifically it affects the development of the careers of women, the development as well. First of all, it will directly affect the performance of anyone on the labor market, on the management, but at the very end can affect the career. And for us, it's important to have the best staff, men, women, but also to know that they are working on the best conditions. And we believe that violence against women is not something that it's your private life. It first is a public health issue, right? And has impacts on the public and all of the different areas of the life of women and the areas that they developed in. We want to acknowledge women to support defense. And nowadays we have a law approved by the National Day of Cantineras. This is on November 27th. This is something that we have been celebrating for the last 2 years with an acknowledgement ceremony. And we believe that it's important to have a day where we officially acknowledge as the state of Chile the support of women on defense. We are working or preparing a diagnosis for next year on the requirement that we have in the armed forces of women on sexual diversity. We have conciliation and gender equality on the sector protocol, and we are working and we have installed a sectoral governance for gender approach model. All of the institutions have a mechanism to promote a gender equality. We are promoting the participation of women in peace operations. We have the mechanisms for care And maternity, this is something that influences the development of the career of women, even if it's because their own decision or they are conditioned to a situation that they cannot handle. So we believe that the institutions have the obligation to offer the conditions so everyone can perform the best that they can. We want to recruit more women for the military service. We want to promote the entrance of women to the armed forces. Finally, we want to reach a point where we can move forward not only at a level, but towards the condition where men, women can perform on defense and all of the talents that are available, we can access. We need to generate the conditions for the access, for the deployment, but also for the retention of men and women and their expertise and their talent so they can participate in all of the areas of defense without distinction, discrimination, if it's not reasonable. So everyone who wants to participate and to promote the defense in our country must have the conditions, first the access, deployment, and to stay without distinction of any type. I don't know if I'm okay with time. I thought that I would take longer, but thank you for your attention. Thank you, Paula. Thank you for your complete presentation. Very relevant. The idea is to share through the seminar the best practices and how the Defense Ministry of Chile have moved forward with different initiatives. So, as part of the last presentation of the day, we have talked about how we can promote women on the peace processes. This is the essence of the Resolution 1325 of the United Nations. For this, we have Captain Chris Broughton. He is an expertise. He has been responsible of different ships of the Canadian Navy. He has much information at a personal and professional level. Captain Bolton, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm just going to take a second here and share my slides.
We can hear you loud and clear, and now we're just about to see your slides, hopefully.
And are you able to see the presentation? Can you confirm if you can see them?
Just your camera.
Oh, okay. Hold on, let me see. Oh. Okay, let me go back a second here. Okay, can you see my screen?
One option is that maybe you can shut down your camera and just share the slide.
Okay, I will try that. Just give me a moment.
In the meantime, I just want to share the news that we've increased the number of people that have been registering to our seminar. We are reaching now 12,276 people registered from all over the world. So this is excellent news, so we can reach with our message to more people, more places.
Okay, are you able to see the slides now?
Yeah, we're seeing it on like small. Oh, there you go. That's you, the one that are.
Okay.
Right. Like. Okay, now we can see the slides. See if we can. You can pass them on. Go to the second slide and see if we can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you all for having me here today. I would like to start just very quickly by acknowledging that I'm presenting from Ottawa, Canada, which is the traditional territories of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. We do these acknowledgements in recognition of the historical and current contributions of our Aboriginal people to our culture and history, as well as to reflect on our own personal as well as our national journey towards reconciliation. So I'm going to be talking to you, as was brought up, about an important program that we are part of and take a leadership role of within the United Nations, which is the ELSI initiative. And I think it's really important to lay out why it's called the ELSI initiative. And it's in recognition of someone who's considered very much a Canadian hero, Elizabeth McGill, who is known as Elsie. And this is someone who, against every barrier imaginable, shattered the glass ceiling in a field that was effectively closed to women's participation in her time. She was the first woman to graduate in electrical engineering, the first woman to earn a master's degree in aeronautical engineering, and she became the chief aeronautical engineer in developing the Hunter Hawker aircraft, which was a critical aircraft during the Second World War. And after that, she became a leader in our society in breaking down barriers to full and meaningful participation of all women in all aspects of the Canadian economy. So she's a very fitting name and namesake to put onto this initiative. The ELSI initiative itself was developed as part of the 2017 United Nations Peacekeeping Ministerial, which was hosted in Vancouver, Canada. As the host, there was a desire to come up with a signature initiative that would reflect Canada's values, as well as to provide something that was enduring for the United Nations. And the decision, after reviewing the landscape, was to take a look at where we could go next with the Women, Peace and Security program as it pertained to peacekeeping. And we really focused in on gender parity targets. Now, gender parity targets are extremely important. You cannot get to the next levels of conversation about women in peacekeeping until you actually have enough women in peacekeeping to convince people that those conversations are important. So that was a really, really big part of building up towards this level. And we determined that the time was right in 2017 to take it to the next level, to start looking beyond just the parity targets, but to address some of the limitations we were seeing. And the main one was that although a number of nations were actually deploying quite a lot of women in peacekeeping, they were largely being employed in administrative and custodial roles, and not in the roles that they were either trained for and qualified for at home, and definitely not, we weren't seeing any being deployed in leadership roles. So the ELSI initiative is all about breaking down that next set of barriers, improving the full and meaningful participation across military, civilian, police structures, and at all levels, including in leadership positions. Now, it's important to understand when we talk about meaningful participation, there's a definition that is associated with the ELSI initiative that is used as the guiding principle. And it's that meaningful participation means that women are represented substantially across ranks and functions, including in non-traditional roles and positions of authority, in assignments that correspond to their experience and training, and in an environment offering parity of deployment conditions and a professional culture conducive to barrier-free employment. There are 6 main components to the ELSI initiative. The first one it revolves around the bilateral partnerships and the interior looks. So Canada has a series of bilateral partnerships that we have in place right now. One is working with the Ghanaian Armed Forces at the military level. One is working with Zambia's police forces from our Royal Canadian Military Police. And then our Global Affairs and Foreign Affairs Department works with the Ministry of the Armed Forces of Senegal on governance and diplomatic and civilian participation in peace processes. At the same time, this also composes the development and promotion of barrier assessments. These are assessments that can be taken on by countries to determine their own individual barriers and work towards resolving those to help with better integration, as well as the full and meaningful participation of their women in their peacekeeping forces. This was developed by the DCAF Geneva Center of Security Governance, as well as Cornell University, and is now being piloted by a number of different countries. I think we're up around 28 or 29 countries have now published their barrier assessments, including Canada, who published ours in 2022. The second component is the ELSI Initiative Fund. This is a UN-run fund through UN Women that can be applied to by any troop or police contributing country that will allow for projects that support the improvement of conditions for full and meaningful participation. There are 3 basic streams that these are assessed on. One is on the development of gender-strong units, and this includes being able to provide a premium to units that are deployed that not just meet but exceed their gender parity targets, but also are balanced across all levels of those units. The second one is on the conduct of their barrier assessments. And the third one is called flexible project funding. And these are for innovative ideas that may come out that will help improve the conditions of women within the various militaries and police forces to be better equipped to participate fully. The third component is the receptive mission environments. And this includes on-the-ground looks at camps and on the environments to remove barriers and create conditions for full and meaningful participation without threat of harassment or sexual violence. This can include everything from developing new inclusions into the contingency-owned equipment manual, which lays out what equipment is required on all peacekeeping missions, as well as to the development of what are called the UN Smart Camp Project. And this is building better designed camps that are safer, more efficient, and provide better supports. All of these are underpinned by the 3 other components of advocacy and outreach, continued research, and of course, monitoring and evaluation. I would note out that in partnership with Uruguay and Bangladesh, Canada co-hosted the preparatory meeting on women in peacekeeping for the last United Nations peacekeeping ministerial meetings, which was actually held in Bangladesh and focused on these programs and on how to continue to move them forward. So the project itself, the ELSI initiative, was initially a 5-year initiative, again starting in 2017. As it came up to 2022, there was recognition across the board that it was showing value, and it was extended for another 5 years, which was a really positive development. So we're now into that second phase of the ELSI initiative. So at the time, though, it was a good time to take a look at what was done, and then some of the lessons learned. So some of the key positives that came out of the first 5 years of what we call the pilot phase. There was definitely a sustained increase in deployment statistics across a lot of the categories. In particular, police forces showed a high level of progress in this space, as well as civilian. There remains a lot of work to do for military contingents, and it's still a lot of barriers and a lot of work to continue on. But in the last 2 years since then, there continues to be improvements. There was the full establishment of the LC Fund, which I spoke about before, and thus far it's received over $37 million in donor funding and continues to come in. There was the development of the Measuring Opportunities for Women in Peace Operations methodology. This is the barrier assessment that I spoke about, and I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. There was, again, the piloting of new gender-responsive accommodations, and this leads into the UN SMART camps. And lastly, advocacy by the contact group of LC initiative nations were able to work together and promote, leading to United Nations Security Resolution 2538, which was the first United Nations Security Council resolution particularly dedicated to women in peace operations. Now, as I said, it was a good time to also review and take a look at some of the lessons learned. So out of that evaluation, some of the key findings that came out. Number one is that there were benefits, there were improvements being seen, and there was a desire to stay the course, to continue to move those. There was a look at the fact that barriers is an effective term and concept. I talked about doubling down, about looking at results-based management. We needed to, one of the key lessons learned is that there needed to be a greater focus on actually defining and measuring results. There was a note that, or a lesson learned that although a lot of the gains that were made were positive, that they were also not necessarily in a place where we could consider them sustainable. So we needed to take a look, we need to look further into that. There was a desire to consult more external stakeholders. This includes bringing in more partner nations, but also more stakeholder consultations with civil society groups and organizations. And there was a desire to look at integrating gender equality more deliberately. And I'll talk about that a little bit on the next slide as well. Finally, when we talk about the barrier assessments, and the barrier assessments, as I brought up, are that methodology that a country can use to self-evaluate and take a look at their own systems, culture, governance, and processes from the strategic to the tactical level to try and identify those barriers that exist and then develop plans to work towards resolving them. Like I said, the number of countries that's undertaken them is continuing to grow, and we find that as an extremely an optimistic thing. The results on the barrier assessments themselves, though, have been mixed. While some countries have done them with the view of taking a hard and honest look, some others have not necessarily put in the rigor that is necessary to really identify those barriers that exist to full and meaningful participation. And you need to be willing and able and have the courage to use the barrier assessment to look at the bad stuff. You need to be able to look at the ugly points that exist in your own systems, because you can't address them until you actually bring them out. I was recently at one event where one delegation stood up and they talked about how they got 100% on their barrier assessment as if it was a test. And that's the wrong way to look at it. And unfortunately, it's being more, in those cases being used more as a, bit more of a propaganda tool than what it's really intended for. So we're continuing to work and advocate for the use of barrier assessments. We have shared ours publicly, and including all of the key issues and the 10 critical issues that we identified within our own structures, and we encourage others to conduct them, to publish them, and to discuss them openly, because different countries have different strengths and weaknesses. And by sharing our assessments, we can better leverage each other's experience and our best practices. So this leads into the phase 2, that second 5 years, and what are the priorities for this? Again, I talked about how the gains that we saw remain fragile and reversible. And overall, there's a shifting narrative that's being seen in a lot of international, in a lot of the international groups, where there's often you can even hear people talk about women, peace, and security fatigue, and not wanting to really talk about it anymore, and wanting to talk about other things. And this again, this really ties into that fragility of the gains that are being made. And in fact, the potential reversibility of those gains if they aren't given the attention and they aren't given the support that they're needed. So key to that is really on focusing then on those results, which the first 5 years was really focused on implementation, and the second 5 years is now taking the efforts to really focus in on those results. This means aligning efforts with broader Women, Peace, and Security agenda and current work in the peacekeeping reform that's going on in the United Nations. And we were particularly pleased to see the strong women, peace, and security language that was included in the new Agenda for Peace that was released by the UN Secretary General last summer. It means more deliberately applying an intersectional approach, including engaging men as allies and champions, and taking more of a focus in that line. It also means building and reinforcing the gains to ensure their long-term sustainability. I want to talk just very quickly on the research, because again, the second phase is really delving into the next step of research to really provide evidence-based changes to policy and practice, and to inform interventions that will help grow the LC initiative and help improve its effectiveness. And you can see the areas that are being looked into there. Again, the DCAF, the Geneva Center, is being involved in this, Cornell University, the International Peacekeeping Institute, Monash University, the Latin American Security and Defense Network, and the Stimson Center are all collaborating to take a lead on this research line of effort, and we're really, really excited to see what's going to be released on that. And we are looking to see some of those products as early as this fall. Lastly, if you do want to see a really good example, I'm not going to play this here because I am cognizant of time. But you can look up on YouTube Sarah's story. And in particular, if you do a YouTube search for Sarah's story peacekeeping, it will bring you to this. This was a collaboration with the Geneva Center, but funded by both Canada and the Republic of Korea, to build a story based on real experiences. So although the names in this are generic, everything that's talked about in here are actual real experiences that were provided by women peacekeepers, and shows the importance of continuing on this road, continuing with the LC initiative, and continuing with the work on moving towards full and meaningful participation. It is available in English, French, and Spanish for those who would like to look it up. And with that, I will say thank you very much for your time here this afternoon. I am cognizant that we are getting into lunch, but I very much do appreciate it, as this is something I hope you can see that I am very passionate about, and look forward to continue working on in the future. Thank you very much.
Okay, Captain Ochon, thank you very much for your presentation. This of course, it's a very relevant topic, this fund. Tomorrow we're gonna see another perspective of the same initiative. But again, thank you very much for sharing us with this topic. Muy bien, con esto llegamos a la
So
última.
with this, we have the last presentation of the day, and I want to thank you for your presence, and I want to thank everybody that accompanied us this morning and that shared their comments as well. I'm going to review briefly the agenda for tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to set mainly on the resolution 1325. We're going to start with the greetings from General of three-star General of the Brazilian Air Force, and we're going to tell you how they have been implementing the 1325 resolution in different places like the European Union and the United States and in Chile, and how the IADB has advanced in the advisory for all these countries and all the members and observers of the IADB. And as you can see on the screen, we are also going to review the fund of the ELSI fund and the history and the situation in Chile. We will be able to appreciate this seminar with the moderators that we have today and the IADB, plus the ones that we are here at the room, to so that you will be able to see all the comments that you have given us, and maybe you can see yourselves tomorrow in this session tomorrow. So thank you for accompanying us, and we're going to close today's meeting. Thank you very much.
Recording stopped.